Axanael, that's an X not a Z, is a visual novel which takes its name from the proverb before your very eyes. Typically these would be words of wisdom for someone facing hard times. While misfortune can easily weigh you down, good luck too can turn things around for the better in an instant. Implied in the uplift of the saying, of course, is the idea that good things are bound to come soon after a streak of bad luck, which you might know as the gambler's fallacy, a simple superstition which has enabled untold self-destruction in casinos the world over. But throw this proverb in a gambler's face and watch its meaning take a whole new form. You can ride the high of victory as much as you like, but good times can't last forever. It only makes sense then that Axonile is the name given to the story's central MacGuffin, a 6-shot revolver loaded with a single bullet, offering the greatest of rewards to anyone who dares to pull the trigger. We'll get back to the gun and its game in a minute, but let's get some context first. If you know anything about VNs, Nitroplus is a name you'll be familiar with, having procured some of the medium's most famous, most critically acclaimed, and sometimes both. Names like Urobuchi Gen or Mages might come to mind first, but today's subject is the more understated scenario writer Shimokura Vio, who's probably most known for 2013's Meta Erige Toteno, or, though the credit often goes overlooked, the memorable Suzuha ending to Steins Gate. His first entry into the field, Gekko no Carnevale, was one that seemed to blend in comfortably with its dark action peers, with those weirdly placed text boxes, but reception was generally split due to the writing's main focus. Where a big appeal of the Nitroplus thriller lies in its twisting and surprising plot, Carnevale plays its werewolves vs androids faction war story pretty straight, to focus on its varied heroines instead. Ultimately, the game was chalked up to needing a certain palette to appreciate, splitting most of its readers into a love it or hate it binary. Where his first outing came across like a square peg brute-forcing its way into a round hole, Vio's second work was one which played much closer to his strengths. A far cry from the gothic setting of Beltamont, Italy, Sumaga is bright and surreal, with a magical girl story which lurches between comedy and mystery unpredictably. While both are known for being quite long, Sumaga ditches the lengthy fight sequences of Carnevale to let loose in its slice-of-life segments, giving the characters more screen time with a humorous bent more natural to its creator. Tying all of it together is its major plot point, a Groundhog Day time loop reset upon death, where the player's choices often springboard off of calculated sacrifices and character deaths. If Carnevale was divisive, Sumaga's controversy shouldn't come as a surprise. It sticks out from the Nitroplus catalogue in too many ways to count, and calling the humour lowbrow would be a difficult thing to point-blank deny. That being said, in pretty much every way, Sumaga feels like a confident and right-footed step forward for Vio as a writer, particularly when seeing his later games carry forward its genre-blending, meta-elements, and the oh-so-crucial elevator pitch gimmick. Moving into Axonile, Vio's pride was on full display with the sheer amount of times Sumaga is referenced or explicitly mentioned. Cosplayers roam the streets of Akihabara in full witch gear, branded merchandise for it pops up from time to time, some scenes pay blatant homage, and one side character even returns as a major player. In fact, from the word go in the game's introductory scene, our otaku protagonist Nitori professes his love for his copy, shuddering to even think what his life would be like without it.
俺はこのゲームが好きだ。
Okay, well, this isn't exactly the praise you'd think it is.
妻がドリスってこれは面白いゲームではないというかつまらないというかクソゲーである
In actuality, the only reason he's grateful to have the copy is so that he can sell it and immediately use whatever it's worth to gamble at a pachinko parlor, which turns out to be a measly 100 yen.
さらば愛しきドリームステーション本体
Calling that scene the intro wouldn't exactly be true either. Axonile doesn't start on a title screen, but instead drops you straight into a randomly chosen intro scene, with Nitori being only one of the game's 6 protagonists. Whichever 5 you don't start with have their introductory scenes locked away until you've read everything else, and even the title screen isn't given to you until clearing the true ending. You follow along with your chosen hero's perspective for a time, some short, some long, until an abrupt to-be-continued splash screen brings you to the game's main screen, referred to in-game as the timetable. Axonile's story is a single-day affair, taking place across Akihabara the night of New Year's Eve from roughly 6 till midnight, chronicling the chaos brought about by the gun. So the timetable, meant in the sense of a public transport schedule, comes across like a lively TV print listing to keep the many scenes nice and orderly. Each block comes with its own fun little typography and a handy recap, placing the 6 on a map for a quick refresher as you read through what the others have been up to during your last escapades. You'll regularly find yourself booted back to this screen as you read for one of 2 reasons. Most commonly, two of the protagonists are about to share a scene, but you haven't read up to that point with the other, so the game walls you off to not reuse so much text and stop things from getting too confusing. The other, much rarer stopping point comes from when the plot is about to branch. If you're a coward, these are player-selected choices like any other VN, but if you so choose it, these decisions are entirely out of your control. As mentioned before, Axonile is the name of a revolver used for Russian roulette, but this particular gun is imbued with magical properties to grant the greatest wish of whoever faces its barrel and lives. If you're embracing the true spirit of the game, every pull of the trigger rolls the dice to test the odds you'd expect. And with 6 protagonists, there's no escaping the feeling that death is right around the corner for at least one of them. Implementing gambling into the routes in this way is an exciting concept. It's definitely what sold me on the game. But Axonile shows some real temperance in unholstering the titular gun. The beginning, which you could loosely call the common route before the first shot is fired, finds its strengths in the joy of discovery, following the main 6 while learning about them and their closest acquaintances without drowning in exposition. Everybody moves with purpose, mid-character conflict from the get-go, giving the strong impression that you're dropping into the plot rather than watching it be formed. Not only does it go a long way towards making the game a much more brisk and enjoyable read compared to VO's first 2 outings, but it makes the character interactions truly chaotic with its massive supporting cast. There are frequent surprises when 2 people you wouldn't expect have a history together, and with everyone pinballing around Akihabara, you never know if one new meeting could turn things in your favourite hero's favour or make the situation even worse. In an interview included with the perfect graphics art book, the prominent yellow and black colour palette of the game is stated to be an homage to 1998's Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, but it's easy to see the mayhem of a Guy Ritchie ensemble cast film seep into the script as well. Even just looking at the lead 6, there's a broad spectrum of characters on display, each one filling a different niche for protagonist styles. Nitori, a debt-ridden doujin author, fits the Hitare archetype to a T, while the mysterious Noko, who resembles one of his characters, veers into villain protagonist territory at the worst of times. Where J-Rock idol band drummer Furi is ditzy but kind and gentle to all, wannabe detective Aina is sharp to the point of arrogance, and her love interest turned unwilling transvestite Chiaki is cowardly and abrasive when under pressure. Cover girl Sakura is the wild card who doesn't so easily fit into a clear archetype, riding a garish bike from her rural hometown to Tokyo hunting doujinshi for reasons bewildering to all. It's a tried and tested strategy to cover a wide range of personalities in a single story. Too much sameness and the characters start to melt into a mush of the author's own habits. When it comes to this author, however, VO pushes his cast far away from a middle ground by leaning into tropes and pronouncing their flaws. In theory, the plan is to really love a couple of characters while not caring for a handful of others. Personally, Aina was an immediate favourite who ticked an alarming amount of boxes, but trap protagonists have never appealed to me, and the uwu precious cinnamon roll personality is the exact diametric opposite of what I look for in a prospective woman.
Just kill me.
Just remember, these aren't merely characters, these are protagonists. The centre stage roles whose perspectives colour everything in a VN where almost every line is voiced. Can't stand one of them? Tough luck, because you've got to go back to them eventually to progress, and the screen time is equal no matter how much less important their events may be at the time. One method of imbalancing aside. Even for the impartial reader who enjoys the whole troupe, it's a given that the focus shifts as the plot progresses, and the drama weighs down on some above others. The mainest of the main characters doesn't even feel like the lead for half the game, as the plot follows the rest of the cast, and when the tension does mount, you'll find yourself jumping to another character only to realise they're still halfway through an H scene while the gun's going off. Director Pehara Komiten wanted the game to give off the feeling of channel surfing, a goal I think they meet pretty handily, but it can just as easily feel like the remote's in someone else's hands as the program you were getting into cuts off without warning. Amidst all of the chaos, leaping between wildly different scenes, it's inevitable that the many facets of Axonile start to bleed into each other. The tonal disparity is nothing short of a selling point, pitting the life or death mystery elements, at times bordering on horror, against a madcap comedy of escalating errors. But even if the story was played straight in a linear sequence, it would be hard to ignore the clash between the setting and the subject matter. New Year's Eve is a spiritual time of the year for Japan, as families across the country set their sights on Shinto shrines. With 2 Mikos in the supporting cast and plenty of audio and visual references, religion is a constant presence throughout the game. On the other hand, this is Akihabara, a ward that's as godless as it gets, with vendors pushing the suspect and the scandalous alike. To a foreigner, it's easy to see the game as anti-religious, with how often the sacredness associated with religion is disregarded or made the butt of a joke, but you have to account for the Japanese perspective. According to government figures, while over 60% of its populace reported holding no religious belief, around 65% of them said they still engage in religious practices. The gulf between faith and its rites grows even larger when you compare the 70% of Shinto practitioners to the mere 3% of self-described Shintoists. The model citizen comes of age in the Shinto way sometime in their 20s, but becomes a Buddhist for their funeral. Detached from all religious affiliations, reduced to drawing from the sacred lottery to gamble with the pretext of their choosing for petty luck, discarding the ticket if the results aren't to their liking. Hardly Russian roulette with stakes that low. All the same, Axonile's goal isn't to drag religion down into the mud, but to elevate the ordinary up to the sacred. If the rituals are that arbitrary, what's stopping us from finding value in whatever we choose? The notion of love for another giving people strength isn't worth wasting any words on with how common it is, but a more unique recurring element is Fudi's strange drumming gesture. A self-made ritual of sorts, insignificant to most bystanders, but used to persevere like many real-world stress-coping techniques. For something a bit more tangible, crawling all over Axonile's presentation, promotional materials, and even its opening song is the Kinkakuji, or the Golden Pavilion. Coated in gold foil, a Buddhist representation of spiritual purity and a sign of value and wealth regardless, it stands as a powerful enough symbol to drive one insane, as it did to a monk in the 50s who set it alight in his hatred for the beauty it embodied. Here in Akihabara, it shows up as a garish styrofoam replica strapped to a motorcycle which faintly smells of fish. Regardless, something important enough to risk life and limb over to its owner. The gun itself takes this idea to its logical endpoint, a wartime revolver imbued with wish-granting powers if you partake in its ritual of Russian roulette. Even setting aside the consequences of failure, it sticks out like a sore thumb on the basis of effort. While the other examples merely strengthened the resolve to carry on, this cheat item grants you success immediately regardless of possibility or deservedness. It's a setup we're conditioned to expect comes with a monkey's paw drawback or just desserts in the future. It's just unfair, even with its slim chance of failure. So it may come as a surprise that Axonile the game doesn't condemn Axonile the gun, or the people who use it. In an afterword unlocked after clearing the game, Vio admits that if he toiled away tirelessly and never reached his ideal creation, he'd probably end up pulling the trigger himself. Hard work gives value to your dreams, so you mustn't rely on others to grant them for you. A noble moral, if not one that's easy to internalize and properly live by, which is all too common in the world of magical girls. I don't live in Shimokuro Vio's head, nor are the personal thoughts of mid-2000s eroge scenario writers considered to be widely accessible, but it isn't hard to see why Sumaga may have fallen short of an ideal creation. For its time, it had reviewed quite well, scraping into review aggregator Erogamescape's top 5 in its release year, and polling as 2chan's favourite eroge of 2008, in a year with some pretty stiff competition to boot. All the same, if there was one place in the industry to feel inadequate in, it was Nitroplus. The light-hearted Sumaga of modest sales found itself sandwiched between the first two science adventure titles, and its fan disc would go on to release within months of the company's beloved 10th anniversary title Soko Aki Munamasa. Sumaga had its well-accepted flaws offset by the exciting and novel concept it introduced. As the novelty faded, its lesser parts wouldn't disappear with it. Vio's fellow scenario writers were being propelled to immense success around him, but it seemed his goofier and more divisive writing style would never get him a sturdy foothold in VN history. Axonile likes to take these frustrations out on Nitori. You don't have to be a genius to see how the neat author of a series of unbearably tunibyo goth-lolly doujins might be a stand-in for something. He's deep-end delusional, suffering from money issues, and hounded by debt collectors after struggling to sell anything at a recent convention, wincing with cringe while reading his older works, a literally Me from Hell adaptation style. Maybe this really is how Vio saw himself and his merry crew of clowns, sitting on a legacy of convoluted pornography they'd be embarrassed about as the times left them behind. But let's not ignore that this inglorious successor is pretty dumb itself. It's as inane and repetitive as Sumaga was when it wants to be, and some of the things it chooses to devote its screen time to bewilders me about as much as it bores me. At the same time, with a much smaller script, a number of characters remain underdeveloped, if they weren't just designed for singular punchlines, and the concept isn't used to its fullest potential. For all the times it flirts with horror, violence-wise it ends up unbelievably tame, for a Nitroplus VN no less. Soundtrack overuse, late game ending overlap, it's far from perfect. Thankfully, Axonile doesn't celebrate perfection. In spite of the shameless cliches Nitori stuffed into every panel of his doujins, they're symbols worth drawing pride from and taking solace in as much as anything else in the game. In spite of his uncertain and underappreciated beginnings, Shimoko Revio now finds himself not merely comfortable as an erige writer, but heading original anime series as scriptwriter, series coordinator, and full-on creator. And in spite of all my gripes, this VN did bring me back here to this channel. Disgracefully late, armed with my shitty scribbles and questionable audio quality, just to ramble about why I like it so much. So thank you Magical Girls, and thank you Axonile. Today I think I'll keep at it again.